Let's look at our chapter 26 drills. We have some parsing exercises. And let me remind you, first of all, up here in the top right, of our imperfect prefixes. You can learn the prefixes by remembering the Hebrew name for Ethan, which is Aton. Aton is made up of all the letters that are prefixes for the imperfect, which are Aleph, Yod, Tav, and Nun. And so those are our four imperfect prefixes. We want to keep those in mind, because if we don't see one of those as a prefix, we're not looking at an imperfect. There's no debate about that one. Let's look at number one here. So we have hastir. Hastir. Now I've helped you out by giving you the root, but if we don't know the root, we can see that we have a potential root here of Samek Tav Resh, Satar. If we weren't sure, we could say, well, do we have potential root here of Hasat? But then we have a Yod and Resh at the end, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So our most likely root is Satar, and the Hirik Yod here between the second and third root letter helps us to think immediately of Hifil, but we have a clue from the first letter anyway. If we have this Hey prefix, the Hey does not match any of our imperfect prefixes, but we know for the Hifil that the Hey prefix with the Patach prefix vowel indicates something below the imperfect in the chart. So we're thinking of imperative or infinitive. And so we see hastir here. Here we'll help to look at our verb chart briefly. And so notice that usually for most of the stems, we have the cal here, we have the imperative lines up with the infinitive construct. So we have pakod here in the cal, pakod, and it looks a lot like what you see in the third masculine singular imperfect. So yifkod, you take the yod off, you get pakod, pakod. Similarly with the pal, you've got yipaked, we have paked for the imperative and paked for the infinitive construct. And then even with the nifal, with the prefix, we've got yipaked, we have hipaked here, which is a different prefix but very similar to the imperfect third masculine singular. And then notice that the infinitive construct down here is exactly the same. So the imperative is typically the same as the infinitive construct and very similar to the third masculine singular imperfect, except for the hifil, which is sometimes our renegade stem. Notice that for the hifil, our imperative is hafked, and that's the same as the infinitive absolute and not the infinitive construct. The infinitive construct ends up looking a lot like the imperfect third masculine singular, yafkid and hafkid, whereas the imperative doesn't match. So this is one case where we can't just go by the imperative equals the infinitive construct. Let's come back to our example here. We have hastir, and so we're looking at a hifil, which we can figure out from the prefix and the prefix vowel, the patach. And here we're not looking at an imperative, we're looking at an infinitive. So we have a hifil, infinitive construct, and our root is satar, which in the hifil means to hide. And so we just have then translation hiding or to hide. Depends on context, but could be either one of those. So hiding or to hide. Let's look at number two. We have yitpalalu. Yitpalalu. Okay, we notice that if we recognize the root palal here, pretend that I didn't give it to you. We have the root palal here. We see a yit in front of it, which is our marker of the hithpael, and the yod does match one of our prefix vowels for the imperfect, so we have probably a hithpael imperfect. So we'll call that a hithpael imperfect, and we need to figure out what it is. Our vowel under the first root letter is a patak. That matches the intensives, piel, pual, and hithpael. And then we have a doubled second root letter, which also matches the hithpael. We've already kind of gotten hithpael, but these confirm it. Hithpael imperfect. We have the yod prefix, which tells us it's third masculine something, either singular or plural. And then the shurek tells us that it's third masculine plural. So we have hithpael imperfect, third masculine plural of palal, and that would be they will pray. At least with no other context, that's how we would translate it. Okay, let's look at number 3. We've got tasterna. Okay, that's actually a typing error. The accent should be there on tasterna. I believe it's correct in your drills. So tasterna, we have again satar, but we'll again try to pretend that that's not there as we try to analyze this. We see the prefix here, the tav with the patak. Since that's a potential imperfect prefix, we try to look and see if we can find a root here. We've got satar, which we recognize, and then we have a na ending, which matches one of our imperfect endings. So it kind of all fits together as imperfect. We've got the tav prefix with the patak prefix vowel. That tells us hifil. And then we've got satar, and the tav tells us that we have either a third feminine singular or some second masculine plural, second feminine plural, third feminine plural forms. So there's several things that it could be. But we see the na ending, and that we know from the cal tells us it's second feminine plural or third feminine plural. So we have hifil, we had the imperfect already from the tav prefix, and then we have second feminine plural or third feminine plural, and so it would be either you, feminine plural, or they, feminine plural, will hide. Okay, let's look at number 4. This is a form that is often mistaken for a piel, and in certain cases it actually could be a piel, but in this case, since we don't have the kind of letter that drops a dagesh forte, one of our so-called Schemenlevy letters, that may drop its dagesh forte if it's supported by a vocal schwa. In this case, we don't see a dagesh forte, and so we have to think that we're looking at something in the cal realm, since the box doesn't match anything from the PL. Even though that Hirek reminds us of PL, the lack of the dagesh forte in R2 tells us that we're not matching a PL, and so we need to look at cal. And the reason it's a little bit confusing is because it doesn't match any of our perfects. Remember that a cal perfect third common plural would be katalu, and so katalu does not obviously match kitalu, so we need to look something below the imperfects. If we had a yod there, it would look a lot like yiktalu, which would be one of our imperfects, and so we recall that one of our second person imperfects, our second masculine plural, tiktalu, like that. And so if we take the prefix off, and then we have to upgrade the when we have two schwas next to each other, we have to upgrade the first one to a full vowel. We have kitalu, And so we have a cal imperative, masculine plural. It's implied to be second. You could put second if you want, but you don't have to. Cal imperative, masculine plural of katal, and the meaning here then is the command to kill. So it would be kill, or you kill. It'd be a command to kill. Kind of a dramatic command, but probably see it here and there in the Bible. Alright, let's look at number 5. We have ekaper. Ekaper. This is a newer word. I believe it was given perhaps in one of the more recent chapters of kafar, but pretend we don't have that. We do have the aleph. It looks like one of our prefix consonants, and sure enough it is one of our prefix consonants from Aton. And so kafar is a good choice for the root. The aleph would give us a first common singular. We need to look at the prefix vowel. We see a half vowel under the aleph, which is a hataf patach, and this indicates piel or pual imperfect. So now we need to look at the R1 vowel. And the patach R1 vowel and the doubled R2 tells us piel. So we have a piel imperfect, and that is a first common singular of kafar, to cover or atone, and that would then be I will atone, or I will atone for something. Alright, let's move things up a little bit so we're more in the middle of the page here. We have number 6, ganavu. Ganavu. Alright, this looks a lot like the one we just mentioned up here under number 4, katalu. Kind of gives it away, but ganavu in this case, we have the comets under the first root letter, ganavu, and this is just simply our cal perfect third common plural. The u ending and the lack of a prefix and the comets under the first root letter is telling us that we have a cal perfect. Remember that if we have, under number 4, if we have a hierarch there, we're looking at an imperative, but the comets is our key that we're looking at a cal perfect under the first root letter there, comets. So cal perfect third common plural of ganav, which is to steal, and so they stole.